Coming up on the Celtics Talk Podcast, my buddy Tom Westerholm stops by from Boston.com to break down game one of the Celtics season. And then later in the episode, Celtics hero from that game, 46 points in 46 minutes, Jaylen Brown. Talked to him on media day. I thought it was interesting, just his approach to the offseason and having the wrist injury and trying to get better. Jaylen has a lot of good thoughts about like how he approaches this sort of steady growth we've seen this year. That's all coming up on the Celtics Talk Podcast. All right, Tom Westerholm, Boston.com, Geno Time Pod. You've already got warmed up on your own podcast, so I hope you're coming in with hot takes. And I guess I'm gonna roll the ball out there for you. Celtics opening night, crazy game, double overtime. Like, what's your number one takeaway that you walked away thinking from that game?
Well, I mean, aside from Jaylen Brown is good, that's the obvious one.
Are we sure Jaylen Brown is good? No,
look, man,
I'm kidding.
At some point, you have to stop denying the evidence and just admit that the man is good at hooping. Don't know what else to tell you. Yeah, I mean, Jaylen was awesome. And then I think the other takeaway is just like the Celtics, I think, are going to be as good as he and Jayson Tatum are this season, right? And if Jayson Tatum struggles like that, or if Jaylen Brown had a night like Jayson Tatum did, I feel like Celtics are going to have a hard time beating some of the better teams in the East. And that's, not I apologize to not get things off to a flaming hot start, but I mean, if the Celtics' best players aren't that good, then I don't think they're going to win that many games. But I also don't think they're going to go 7 for 30 very often.
I mean, can we just stop? And because I even as I'm writing last night, I sit there and say to myself, Jaylen Brown just played 46 minutes, probably 46 minutes removed from quarantine, and put up 46 points. Are we giving that how crazy is that, given that it took Jayson Tatum probably 46 days to work his way back from COVID?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously every COVID diagnosis is different. So, there is that, but I mean, at the same time, you hear Jaylen talking about how his breathing was irregular. You hear him talking about how his heart was beating out of his chest. I mean, those are like kind of scary things coming off a COVID, diagnosis. And for him to just go out there and just kind of power through, I mean, whatever you want to say about how concerning it is, however you want to go about that, it's still impressive. Like that's still, a heck of a performance. And just, the variety of baskets that he made, like the different ways that he scored, like he wasn't just, hot from three, which, he was, but he was also getting to the rim. He was also hitting those turnaround jumpers that he's really good at. I mean, he was like genuinely phenomenal. I think obviously the Celtics would have had no chance if it wasn't for his heroics, but just, he just seems to get better every year. And it seems like, it's plausible that he's done it again.
I enjoy that we say that growth isn't linear and that guys like go up and down and kind of ride that roller coaster, except for Jaylen, besides the years that intersect with Kyrie is just like a 45-degree angle up. And I always marvel because, I'm sitting there talking to him in the preseason. I say, he didn't really have an off season. He's recovering from wrist surgery. He had kind of couldn't do too much. You can run all you want, but what could we realistically expect for him to add to his game? But he sat there and he watched a bunch of film, and he won't tell us who he watched. At times last night, I thought it was Michael Jordan because he just looked that way where he wanted to dominate games. And there is this notion where, and I'm guilty of it as anybody, where we get fixated on Jayson Tatum could be really, really good. He's going to be special. He's going to probably be a top 10 player in the league. And then we always say, well, then Jaylen can be a top 20 guy. But at what point do we just sort of relent? Like, we need to stop putting ceilings on Jaylen Brown because every year he goes up. And two, it does it matter? Does it matter? Batman, Robin, all that stuff. Do we get too obsessed with that?
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible we do, for sure. And I mean, I think to your point, he did this. He said the same thing last offseason too, right? Before he came into the season, he said like, it was a short offseason. This is just me having another opportunity. I didn't really get a chance to work on anything, but the jump last year was super noticeable as well. So yeah, he keeps doing this. And I mean, I think you're right to say that maybe we need to be careful about putting ceilings on him. He's really good. And it's not for nothing. There were lengthy stretches last year where he was the best Celtic, right? Like there were times when he was just objectively the best player on the floor. Times when the Celtics might have been considering trading for, another superstar. They opted not to, I think largely because Jaylen Brown looked as good as he did and looked like he has as much potential as he does. So yeah, I think not putting ceilings on two young superstars who are only getting better is probably the right way to go about things.
He's also the world's oldest 24-year-old. When I was talking to him, it's so funny because he's sitting there and he's like, man, I'm about to be 25 years old. Year 6 for me. And I'm thinking, I'm trying to relate to me when I was 24, what I was trying to do. I was like, I think I was hoping, I was like, man, buying a house would be really cool soon. And Jaylen Brown is just dominating an NBA stage and improving and opening swag stores and doing all this. It's remarkable to me, the growth and development that occurs amidst everything that Jaylen immerses himself in. So, but still, like just the way COVID has affected players, and I know it's different for everybody, and we can't just say that it's like uniform, like every guy's going to struggle coming back or whatever, but still remarkable to me, the game that he had. Let's turn to the negative. Jayson Tatum. What's your panic meter when Jayson Tatum goes 7 for 30? Because like that's what we do around here. We break out panic meters after one game.
Well, I mean, look, I don't think it's a 0. Like, it's not high because obviously he's Jayson Tatum. He's not going to, like Ime Udoka said it, he's not going to shoot 7 for 30 very often. But I think if there is a concerning thing, it's the fact that he does do this semi-regularly, right? Like he does have these absolute stinker games, and sometimes they come at inopportune times. Like it's happened in the playoffs before where he just cannot get it going. So it's like, I don't think there's no reason to like panic. He's still, going to be a star. He's going to make an all-star team. He might be an all NBA player this year. Like I think all of those things are still true. But at the same time, it's like, I think maybe the next really important thing in his development is just like making these like 7 for 30 games. If you're off, maybe can you be 13 for 30 instead of 7 for 30? You know what I mean? Can it just be like what, and however you go about that, maybe instead of hoisting so many 3-pointers, you get to the rim a little bit more. I think that's like, we talked all off season about how much muscle he's putting on and how maybe that's going to help him kind of rumble to the basket and get more free throws. That's got to be it. So it's not like a panic meter because it's the first night of the season. It's MSG. Like it's, this high pressure, high leverage game. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but these 7 for 30 performances aren't like good. So, if you can trim them out, that probably helps.
It is sort of fascinating to me that someone could be that good at basketball and still fall into the trap. And maybe it's just a young player thing where you need to figure out when you don't have it, what you have to do and like how you change your approach to the game. I thought it was pretty interesting that Ime Udoka comes out after the game and says, in those instances, we tried to get Jayson going, he and getting him going to the basket, and there was still a crowd and he couldn't get himself going. In those instances, you need to give the ball up a little bit more, and especially to Jaylen Brown. I like that accountability. I hope Jayson takes that to, like the positive way in terms of like, that's why you have another superstar like Jaylen Brown there to take the ease, to ease things when he doesn't have it going. But it is remarkable that, I looked up and I said 5 for 20 in the first half. This isn't odd. Like Jayson has these sort of slow starts often. And it's weird. He'll get it cooking in the second half, and he never did. I same deal. I'm not ready to slam the panic meter. We'll have a whole bunch of overreactions to who stinks and who doesn't after one game. But it's too bad because, and fair or not, like Tatum talked a big game coming into the year in terms of like how he was going to approach this year and his desires to be amongst the top 10 players. And of course, now everybody's tweeting me and saying, oh yeah, so much for Jayson Tatum dominating. And I'm like, I didn't say it, like, so we'll see how that plays itself out. I want to get to some of the supporting cast, and I just want to get your takeaway. Grant Williams, was it a positive night for Grant or a negative night for Grant?
See, I think it was a positive night because the offense was good. He obviously had helps them kind of come back in the end. Look, the Celtics asked him to drop a bunch of weight. That's going to make it hard to guard Julius Randle. Yeah. Like Julius Randle is just a monster now. Especially when Randle starts off the game by hitting a step back 3-pointer and then a jab step 3-pointer. It's like, okay, like I don't know what Grant is supposed to do about that guy, especially Grant when he's lost a little bit of weight and he might not, be able to handle, Randle just driving right at him. So it's like, I thought the Celtics, putting Rob Williams on Randle down the stretch made a lot of sense. And I think that's going to be the big negative takeaway for Grant. But overall, I mean, if he's hitting threes like that, if he's playing pretty well offensively, I think he is going to be able to, play some minutes, maybe work his way into the rotation. So, overall, I think it was a positive. Certainly there were negative aspects to it, but in general, I think you saw some encouraging things from Grant going forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, I at first when he was getting cooked by Randall, I'm thinking, man, tough spot, getting thrown into the starting lineup, and but you could see the flashes of what he does that Al brings to that lineup, and maybe very much like Brad Stevens, I think Ime Udoka is trying to maintain a little bit of continuity with that second unit in terms of, knowing you don't have Josh Richardson, you don't want to probably throw another wing like Romeo out there. I think going into the game, he's thinking, I got to limit Jaylen's minutes. That kind of went out the window, but that went out the window with everybody because of the craziness of the game. And I mean, Tom Thibodeau was going to play everybody 50 minutes anyway, but I don't think Udoka went into that game thinking that way. But I like the flashes from Grant. I like that he kind of hung in there despite the sort of ups and downs of guarding Julius Randle. I still don't quite know how this rotation is going to look. I thought it was interesting that, Cantor doesn't play and that they kind of stayed small the whole night. Can they get away with that every night? I don't know. But certainly on this night, Grant sort of redeemed himself with those big 3-pointers in the fourth quarter and helping them get to overtime. I think Romeo's clearly in the up category. Nesmith has been the other young guy that we've sort of fixated on and role. Were you surprised that he sort of just didn't have it going in night one?
Him and Pritchard, it was weird watching those guys just not really have anything, especially as we're watching Romeo just like step into transition 3-pointers and look great. Like, I mean, I guess surprise is a tough, kind of a tough word for it, just because it is again, it's Madison Square Garden. It's a high pressure, high leverage situation. It's a little bit different, than preseason and summer league, where these guys are just kind of told, hey, go rock out, have fun. So yeah, I mean, it was very much a different role for those guys. I think as they adjust to those roles, we'll have a better idea of how much they can actually contribute. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just a very mixed bag. Like, I think you don't want to overreact to one performance, but this is how Romeo has looked all preseason. So, I think there's a lot of encouraging signs that he just kind of continued that, right into getting a real opportunity in the rotation. But, I'm not, again, panic meter real low on Nesmith at this point. Like, let's see what he looks like on if he's thrown into the rotation on like a Tuesday night in Detroit, as opposed to, a Wednesday season opener at Madison Square Garden, where everybody is just, completely fired up.
Yeah, I'll be interested if we do this episode in a week, like how we feel about guys, and it's just natural. And I can joke about it all I want, but it's fair or not, you do sort of overreact to the immediateness of it. And the first time we're seeing these guys in real games, one player who I had high aspirations for that I was a little bit disappointed by, or I don't know, disappointed might be the wrong word, but Dennis Schroeder. I really thought, based on sort of, and again, we only saw him twice in the preseason, but especially that last game, the flashes that he could do offensively, the Rondo-like creativity going to the basket, the ability to both create for himself and others. Should I be, I don't want to do panic meters all day here, but, defensively, which we sort of knew, like very good on ball defender, but sometimes loses his way in the team scheme. Should we be concerned that the end of the game they're losing Fournier a little bit, and or is that reading too much into one night where everybody had played 50 minutes?
Well, I think the other thing to remember is that, like what Udoka was saying after the game, where how they switched the defensive system from switching 1 to 5 to 1 to 4 with Rob staying put. It seemed like everybody kind of struggled with Fournier in that regard. There was that one play where Jaylen, kind of yelled at Rob, and Rob was like, no, like I was supposed to be where, I'm supposed to stay put. So, I mean, I think, the thing with Schroeder, we kind of know what the Celtics are going to get with him, right? It's like you said, the defense, really good on ball, not so good off ball. And, offensively, if he can get to the rim, if he can, kind of use that first step to get by guys, you're going to see a lot of offensive success. If he's just turned into a jump shooter, maybe less so. So, I mean, I think that was definitely a tough first game for him. I think a lot of things, like Tatum struggled to get to the rim, right? Like if Tatum's struggling to get to the rim, I think Schroeder is going to struggle too. So, we'll see again what it looks like in a week. But you're right. I mean, I think the Celtics win if they get a better performance from Tatum. I think they also probably win if they get a little bit better performance from Schroeder, right? Like, 5 for 16, like that's just not going to get it done. So yeah, I mean, I think discouraging for sure, not the end of the world, but not what you wanted to see on an opener.
Tom, you're not going to last long in this podcasting game if you're not going to overreact to everything. That's what we're supposed to do. I'm ripping up my
Tatum immediately.
I'm sixth man of the year ballot has been ripped up as I casted my preseason vote. I might need an entire hour to dive into Time Lord, but you brought up Udoka, and I just want to get your take. Any early impressions that stood out to you in terms of whether it was the timeout usage, the demeanor, like what jumped out to you for night one for Ime Udoka?
Yeah, there were a few things. I thought, number one, it seems like the Celtics really want to play for that guy. Like Jaylen saying after the game that, he wanted to play specifically because he didn't want to miss Udoka's first game. I mean, I can't imagine, and nothing against Brad Stevens. Like Jaylen always seemed to respect Brad Stevens. I can't imagine Jaylen saying that about Brad Stevens.
Right.
That was, a very noteworthy thing. And I thought, Tatum saying I wish we could have gotten him a win in his first game. These guys, I think, want to play for him. So that's a good sign. I think that everybody's kind of buying in on that score. I thought he should have used the challenge on that Jaylen layup. I get you're trying to save your timeouts. That's a 3-point swing at a time when the Celtics really needed it. And maybe they don't get it. Maybe there's not enough evidence to overturn, but
would it have mattered? I'm trying to think. They didn't need the timeout towards the end of regulation, right? They ran out of timeouts on the last play.
They literally didn't need it on that last play.
So I don't know. Maybe he went to the Brad Stevens school of challenging, where Brad only challenged plays that were clearly not going to be ruled in his favor, and Ime needs to be able to roll the dice. I know he's explained that. Behind the bench, they had a good view of it and they thought, there wasn't going to get overturned. But I agree. It's funny that, that's how we judge coaches now, how they use timeouts, how they use challenges. It all sort of matters.
Yeah. I mean, well, they're all so far ahead of us in terms of defensive schemes and everything. And it's okay, well, the thing I understand is timeouts. So you didn't use your timeout, right? But then I thought the other thing that I really liked was, after the end, this is just a media thing, but after the game, when he explained that kind of switching 1 through 5, turning to switching 1 through 4, I just thought that was such a breath of fresh air. Again, Brad is brilliant. And, he was always very polite, but he was always very politely stonewalling us. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas I really appreciated just kind of that, well, here's what was supposed to happen. It didn't happen. And then everybody just kind of moves on, but we're a little smarter for it. And I really appreciated that from him, because it was a breath of fresh air of that explains why Fournier kept getting open. Right. And, I hope that continues. It was nice to have that particular aspect of him.
Even just announcing your starters at shoot around before a game, and look, there's a little bit of gamesmanship to everything that goes on, and Brad certainly tried to manipulate that. I think the rest of the league is pretty smart in terms of knowing who is going to play and who isn't. Most of these guys have the same agents, and you can probably figure out that information quicker than Johnny journalist could. So I don't know if there's too much other than messing with us that Brad clearly probably enjoyed a little bit. But I'm sort of with you there. I like the refreshing honesty from Udoka just in general, from roasting Brad at the introductory press conference about the low assist percentage to, letting guys know early in training camp, okay, if you complain, that's not going to fly here. And then owning it when Grant Williams does it in a preseason game, and the accountability and all that. It definitely feels and part of this, I do believe, is Brad Stevens sort of, behind the scenes empowering Ime to do this by saying look, here's what I couldn't get across. And here's where I think you need to be your warm but demanding self and get this out of our players. I do like that he sort of isn't afraid to sort of open things up a little bit and be a little bit, there's no curtain where Brad preferred that stuff behind the scenes. Ime seems okay. And I'm sure there'll be instances, the smart stuff, they didn't sit here writing a book about what happened and how it all played out. But there's a little bit more transparency. And like you said, selfishly from a reporter standpoint, you're watching the Celtics have those miscommunications. And sometimes that might've been we'll figure that out in practice. But now we kind of understand, okay, they made a defensive change that, for better or worse, probably didn't work. And, and New York can understand why they did it. And it just contributed to some of that end of the game situations. All right. We're much too far into this podcast without me talking about Rob Williams.
I'm shocked that it took you this long.
I know. I've had to show restraint because, sometimes I can just all of a sudden 45 minutes later and we're still talking about Rob. But I will say this, even the most pom-pom waving Rob Williams fan did not expect 45 minutes of court time. He was as gassed as anybody in that second overtime, probably the end of the fourth quarter. But am I okay to be like encouraged? Like, I mean, the stat line's inflated because he played a ton of minutes, but Rob's impact was tangible. Can they bottle that up on a night-to-night basis? Can he stay healthy? Am I okay to continue being the Time Lord biggest fan?
If I were you, I'd be losing my mind right now. Like he was awesome. Like not only was he on the floor for 45 minutes, not only did he stay healthy that whole time, he committed one foul. You know, the whole like unbelievable. And you know, I thought it was interesting how ground bound he was. Like he was not flying everywhere. When he blocked shots, they were very in control. Like I thought, you know, a couple of times he let guards get by him and then he blocked the shot. And that's what he's always done. But when he did that before, it felt like he was using his athleticism. And yesterday it just looked like he was kind of using timing and length. It's like, if that's what Rob Williams is doing now, like, my goodness, like that's really important for him defensively. The fact that he just like stayed with Julius Randle, the fact that he was so good on Randle, the Celtics just decided like, okay, you can't switch. Like, don't ever switch. Right. We just want you guarding their best player. I mean, these are huge moments for him, I think, in terms of his development. Like you said, you know, like the numbers were a little inflated because of the overtime period. But again, you know, he was 5 for 5. He didn't miss. He was 6 for 8 from the free throw line. Like, all these things are really crucial. So I think I thought that was just a brilliant performance by him. And I thought it really kind of hammered home. Like, I don't know how you feel. I feel like we're definitely headed for double big lineups just because
for sure.
Like Horford looked so good in his minutes in the preseason and Rob looked so good in his opener. It's like, okay, like these guys both have to be on the floor, and then hopefully it works out because they're both, you know, better than Tristan Thompson, certainly, and better than Daniel Theis. So, you know, the talent level is a little bit higher this year. And I think the Celtics, you know, hopefully that works out.
All right. Well, I'm going to need a minute after you just played the role of me and pumped up his tires so much. But I do agree. You know, the one thing I am concerned about with the double big lineup is like, where do you go from there? And we saw they didn't play Cantor last night. I think they understood defensively. They couldn't put him out there without it being a real issue for a team that was already having some defensive lapses. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is there. I don't suspect that like Bruno Fernando is the answer or whatnot. So they're going to have to figure that out, where if they go with Al and Rob at the starting lineup, are they going to Grant and going small? Are we seeing more Wancho? Like, I need to know how that's going to look before I'm ready to buy in. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you are going to play your core 9 or whatever it's going to be, big minutes, then maybe it's not such a big deal. You just have to hope and cross your fingers that Rob and Al stay healthy. You mentioned Rob being a little bit more ground bound. And I think that's something that's like, that was pretty obvious during the preseason. And I think when the knee thing flared, we kind of wondered, oh boy, is this like you know, just not being himself? Is it okay for Rob to compromise some of what he was in terms of just being above the rim all the time at the expense of staying to the ground? Or like, does he need to find that right balance between, you know, staying disciplined and being the guy whose head is on top of the backboard?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the early returns suggest that it is okay, right? Like I think Rob, you know, he kind of got this reputation as like kind of a spacey guy or whatever, but I do think that he seems to have like a pretty high basketball IQ when he's not like jumping for everything, right? He's such a good passer. And then I think, you know, a game like last night defensively, he was in position so much of the time, right? Like that's not necessarily something we saw from him all the time before. So I think it's fine as long as, you know, as long as he keeps having performances. I think some balance would obviously be good, right? And you do want it, like you mentioned, you do really want to know that the knee is okay and that he's not just that he's ground bound because he's trying to stay in front of people, as opposed to he's ground bound because just like he's hurt and trying to mask it or whatever. You know, obviously you're hoping, but that's not the case. But I mean, again, if he's playing like this in control, he's still super long, you know, and he's still, you know, he's still got some of these IQ things. He's still got some of this positioning. Like that's, you know, that matters quite a bit. So I think some balance would certainly be good, but I do think that it just kind of not jumping for everything, staying out of foul trouble, and just kind of staying on the floor. I mean, that's crucial for him.
That one smart lob made me feel better, where they were in transition and
Yep.
saw sort of like old school Rob go up, and I was like, okay, he can still jump. Like, he isn't trying to prepare for Andre Drummond so much that he's forgotten how to leap out of the building. So that's an encouraging sign. Any other wholesale takeaways from this game? Are you ready to adjust your season projection on where they'll finish in the Eastern Conference based on one night or anything preposterous like that?
No, if anything, I felt like, my projection for them felt like, they're about as, maybe a little bit. I thought they were a little bit better than the Knicks, and they just kind of like had a bad performance from Jayson Tatum. Like, I feel like, again, if Tatum doesn't go 7 for 30, I think they probably win that game. But I do think they're right in that range, right? Like, I think they're going to be a pretty good team. Might have some inconsistent nights, but just kind of generally, I think this is a good basketball team that's going to make a solid playoff push. We'll probably be right in that middle of the range. Just kind of depends on how good everybody else is in the Eastern Conference. But I like where they're at. I think I'll be curious to see how they react when like the lights are a little dimmer against the Raptors, and all of that. But again, they have a lot of firepower. When some of these guys, when Schroeder gets a little more comfortable, I'll be curious to see how that goes. If they can get a little bit more from Nesmith and Pritchard. And yeah, if Jayson Tatum looks a little more like Jayson Tatum, I think there's a lot of pieces here that are pretty intriguing. So all in all, I mean, yeah, the Celtics lost, but it was an exciting game. And I think there's a lot of kind of encouraging signs.
Yeah. And well, to summarize our discussion today, Rob Williams is headed for the Hall of Fame. The Celtics should be better than a 0-1 team. And I'm like I said, like, as much as I joke about overreacting here, I do think there was more good than bad in night one. And ultimately, it wasn't one of those games where I walked away and said, like last year, they would have those sort of, spirited comebacks, and then you just knew they weren't going to win the game. Whereas this one, it felt like it mattered to them. And, like, this is a team that might show a little bit more resiliency. I don't know. I'm not ready to declare unequivocally that they're different from last year and all that. But I do feel pretty encouraged based on what I saw. And just like you, I yearn now for what Brad Stevens always wanted: more data, more of a sample to know what's real and what's fake. But unfortunately, all we have is one game to overreact to. So Tom Westerholm, Boston.com, Geno time. Is there anything that you want to tease, anything super great on your pod that people, after they're done listening to this one, could go listen to yours?
Well, we got a lot of feedback last year that we were super negative, and I will say that on our first takeaway pod of the season, we were pretty positive. We touched on a lot of good things. I think it's a better team this year, so we promise to be a little bit less negative.
I enjoy that because I often heard from people who watched our broadcast last year that they're like, wow, you're being pretty negative about this team. And my response was always,
what do you want from us?
Are you watching this infuriating basketball team? And that's why I think there's I kind of wrote about this yesterday in terms of, like, just overall, to me, before the COVID thing, Jaylen Brown had this like palpable energy in his media sessions, in what I saw, kind of in small bursts, obviously in game one of the preseason. And I think that permeates the whole team right now. And I thought there was just sort of for me, there was this bigger picture of like Kemba on the other side last night and not having Kemba, and Jaylen coming out, but having that positive. So like, I think in the grand scheme of things, one of my biggest takeaways is there's optimism this year, and it's okay. So everybody go listen to Geno time and bathe in that optimism, and then come back to Celtics Talk and we'll hang out. With Tom Westerholm. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, good stuff there from my buddy Tom. I put him in a tough spot. Like, we're supposed to overreact to everything that goes on in game one, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody. I'm sitting there, and I had Dennis Schroeder as my sixth man of the year in my preseason article, and then last night I'm ready to pronounce that he might not be the right fit, and so we'll see how it plays out. We need a bigger sample of how it looks out there, but like I said, more positive than negative on night one. And I'm eager to see how this team looks going into the weekend. Teams like Toronto and obviously Houston, chances for them to maybe show a little bit better outside of the craziness of MSG. Now, again, Jaylen Brown, the big story of the night. The dude was in quarantine probably 20 hours before they fly to Madison Square Garden, goes out there and puts up 46 points a career high and a career high 46 minutes. This on a night where they were going to manage his minutes. So I got a chance to sit down with Jaylen before the start of the season on media day. I thought his energy was just palpable in terms of just trying to set the tone for this team, maybe growing further into that leadership role. I thought it was interesting how he approaches just growth and development in terms of, Jaylen gets better every year. And we all sort of say, well, it's because he works hard, but he puts so much of it on just opportunity and the ability to sort of the roles that he's had. That one season with Kyrie here, he was sort of a complementary piece, but now in the spotlight, the pillar of the franchise, I think we're starting to see just what Jaylen Brown can do as an NBA player. And he, as you hear, he's only 24 years old, but he speaks like a grizzled veteran. So here's our interview with Jaylen Brown. Let's start with health-wise. How you feeling? Obviously, end of last year, wrist. Like, how you feeling as we near training camp?
I feel good. I still think I'm ahead of my schedule. Some days feel better than others. Of course, the wrist is like tricky. Some days it could flare up and things like that. But even on my worst days, I still feel like myself. So I feel like I'm in a good spot and I'm ready to go.
What was that like? Because every summer you've gone off and you've come back with something new. Did the injuries at all prevent, I guess, just make it more difficult, or were you still able to find ways to want to improve?
I think that people think that every year I come back and do more, which is true. I work hard. I have a really good work ethic, but I think the opportunity just changed from year to year. So, of course, there's a work ethic that goes into it, but then my role and responsibility changes as well, so people get to see me in a new light, and they think that maybe talent falls from the sky.
I do think it's impressive because we always say, right, like growth isn't linear, that guys go up and go down and go up, like whatever, but really, we did a project last year, we went back and watched, and like your ability to handle the basketball now from your rookie year is so different. Do you ever go back and watch old film and say like, or even recent film and say, this is what I want to do, or do you ever make something a specific focus?
I think there's some truth to that. I talk about it a lot with my friends, but I think that my role, my rookie year, was not to dribble the ball. And people forget that. Like when I would practice and train, like I would only train in situations that train me, that I would be in the game. And I wasn't a ball handler in the game, so I didn't work on my ball handling ability a lot in my rookie year because the coaches didn't want me to dribble. It wasn't because I was incapable. I think I've always been able to dribble the ball. I didn't think I just learned how to dribble the ball the last 2 years. I just think it was a skill that I definitely wasn't asked to use, so maybe it kind of wasn't as sharp. So I've definitely improved as a ball handler, so there's some truth to that, but to say that maybe my ball handling skills, I just learned how to dribble a basketball 2 years ago, it's kind of probably blown out of proportion a little bit.
So one of the buzzwords, and maybe it's just we got to write articles on something, but a lot of times we keep hearing people say like improving playmaking this year. You said it recently that is something that you'd like to take another step with. How do you do that though? It feels like whether it's dribbling or shooting, whatever, like that's something you can do. Like, are there actual methods besides just reps and to become a better playmaker?
I think it's film, so it doesn't have to necessarily be on the court. I think it's just watching the game, watching film and breaking it down, which I do a lot with my skills coach, Tony Dobbins. Watch a lot of the great playmakers in the league and try to emulate some of the strategies and things that they do to kind of help with your playmaking ability. So a lot of it is just really breaking down the details of who are great playmakers and how they are great playmakers. Like where are their eyes when they have the ball in their hands? What are they looking for? Is that something that they just naturally have, or is something that they kind of have worked at, over time, and just breaking that down and studying that?
Do you set goals going into a year, whether it's individuals, like little stuff like that, or like greater in terms of what you want the team to accomplish? Like how do you work through it?
Yeah, you set personal goals, you set team goals, etc. One goal that I always set is to just be healthy for a full season as much as I can. To be a better leader every year, just take steps in that category, and to continue to just build chemistry and win. I think that's always goal is just to win. I think that's everybody's goal, and that we always say. I think that's just the way of life around here, is that we're expected to win games, no excuses. So to do that is a goal.
How hard was it then to watch the end of last year and having to sit out the playoffs?
It was hard to watch last year, just in general. I think that circumstances had a lot to do with it, but we don't use that as an excuse. COVID, protocols and things like that made it a lot harder to just go out there and play basketball under normal conditions and things like that. But, everybody had the same conditions, and people, adapted better than we did. But I'm excited for this year. I'm excited for the opportunity this year. I think our team is building chemistry as we speak. We're excited. We just want to come out and play basketball and have fun.
All right, good stuff, Jaylen Brown. Like I just a fascinating individual. I just can't get past it. It's a lot of NBA players struggle coming back from COVID, and while everybody is different, Jaylen being able to go out there and do what he did on that MSG stage was remarkable. And we're recording this on Thursday. The Celtics were supposed to we're supposed to have practice this afternoon. They scrapped that. 2 overtimes, all the big minutes for everybody. They decided to rest everybody up. We'll see how they look on Friday night against the Toronto Raptors. I need everybody, while we're waiting, to go like, subscribe, check us out on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time on the Celtics Talk Podcast.